right, a good nerve Shabbos, everybody. It's Rabbi Kolakowski again, the Kubletzer Roof. And we had, I think it was a Geschmack Dvar Torah that I said about Parshas Noach. And now I want to talk about some secular things, really secular things. Secularism as it is, and related to something that we mentioned. We mentioned the story that Melech Biederman quoted from Elchanan Wasserman. I heard other tzaddikim say the same thing about how basically if you don't have your Shemayim, you're not a human being. And how Abraham said in next week's Parshas Lech Lecha Rachei Yerushalayim. Well, it's in Vayera. Rachei Yerushalayim b'makom hazeh. That Abraham, he felt like his life was in danger because there's no fear of God in this place, and that the fear of God is what makes us human beings. And fear of God doesn't mean to be scared like a boogeyman, but rather to be in awe of God, and really also just simply to be aware of God. Awareness of God is pretty much what Yiras Shemayim or Yiras Elokim means, Yiras Hashem. And it's interesting because, what do we say? Reish is Chochma Yiras Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. That and fear again can be recognized as awareness. And so therefore, that's what it says in Proverbs. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Reish is Chochma Yiras Hashem. So it can also be understood as that means the first wisdom is the fear of God. Although I would say the beginning of wisdom is probably a better translation. We say that in our liturgy, when we wake up in the morning, little kids, and in Chayder, Raishis Chochma Yiras Hashem, Seichel Toiv Lecholoi Sayem Teilu Sayem Edis Luad, Shem Kvoid Malchisei Loilam Moed. Right? So this is something we teach our children from the youngest age, that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And certain people think they're so smart that they're smarter than those who believe in God. But the truth is, Scripture tells us the opposite, that it's the fool who says in his heart that there is no God. So how do we reconcile that, though, with when we look around at these people who appear to be pretty smart guys, and yet they don't believe in God? And I think part of the answer is that these people might have intelligence, but they don't necessarily have wisdom. There's a difference between wisdom, which is the application of knowledge, and just being what we would call a chamor noisei sfarim, a donkey that's laden with books, just carrying books, but you don't actually know what not just that you don't know what's in them, but you don't know how to apply. You can repeat, by rote what you learn, which is part of, in order to gain wisdom, you do need that rote knowledge. You do need that, but you need to be able to understand it and apply it properly in life. And so, and the way to do that is by gaining awareness of God. But with that being said, I've often argued, and I will continue to argue, for a different reason, that we have to treat atheism as a religion. Now, the atheists will scream and yell, atheism is not a religion. But the fact of the matter is, just about every religion will say, we're not a religion. A lot of evangelical Protestant Christians will say, it's a relationship, not a religion. And Judaism and Islam might say it's a way of life and not a religion. The fact is, all of these are religions, as much as we don't want to call them religions. And part of that is a certain amount of healthy chauvinism. I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way. that we say, that if somebody, they don't want, just like we say, you can't compare our God to anything else. Meaning, even to use the word God to refer to our God as it's used to refer to false gods is almost an insult to our God. And but at least, the fact is, language does that, including the holy language in Hebrew. It's just that we make a distinction between when the name Elohim is used in a secular manner or in a holy manner, and when it's in a holy manner we say Elohim, when it's not being exactly used for holiness, but just in a descriptive manner. And so, but at least in English we have that distinction of the big G and the little g. But the fact is, there is no comparison between our God and between anything else. And so we like to have a certain amount of healthy chauvinism to say there's no comparison between our religion and other religions. And and I remember Rabbi Victor Miller wrote like that, and Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch wrote like that. And there's truth in what they say, but still a lot of people misunderstand that, to understand that you can have some kind of a secular Jewish identity, which is anathema to everything that the Torah has stood for 3,300 years. And that we've developed this sense of Jews that are not following Judaism, and yet they're still Jews, and it's not true. It's not based in how our sages looked at the world. If you look in the Mishnah, you'll see that when it talks about Benos Tzedokim, the daughters of the Sadducees, are they going Ki Yisrael or Kavasei? Are they following the ways of Israel? Are they Jewish? Are they following Judaism? Or are they following the ways of their ancestors, the ways of their traditions? Meaning to say, and so therefore, can we trust them with certain issues in Jewish law? And so the answer is, their religion is not Judaism. They are not part of the Klal Yisrael. They're not part of the Jewish community because they deny the traditions that were given at Sinai, and they've made up their own interpretations of Scripture without our traditions. And if that's the case with the Sadducees, who at least believed in God and engaged in worship of God, all the more so with people who are atheists. Of course they're not Jewish. Of course they're not part of the Klal Yisrael. They're not Gentiles, but there's another category of Yisrael Mumar. There's another category of the Jewish heretic that's not part of the Jewish people anymore. Our peoplehood is linked only in Torah. It's not about the state of Israel or Zionism or lox and bagels or anything, or falafel or anything else. And it's not about even speaking Yiddish or anything like that. It's about the Torah. Now, can you be a Torah Jew who speaks Yiddish? Of course, and many Torah Jews speak Yiddish. Can you be a Torah Jew who eats falafel or who eats lox and bagels? Of course. Can you even be a Torah Jew, perhaps, who is not that much against the state of Israel and maybe wants it to be religious, this and that? I personally disagree with that ideology, but I would not say it's heretical. It's within the realm of Torah, and there are pious Orthodox Jews who have this misguided view, just as I've discussed before. You could be an Orthodox Jew and believe in a false Messiah. As long as you don't worship a false Messiah as a god, you're in error for believing in a false Messiah. And we do make attempts to separate from such people. But what's more concerning, let's say in the case of Shabtai Tzvi Yimach Shemo, is that the Sabbateans were not true to the halacha. They're not following Jewish law. And so therefore, they are outside of the community. Even if earlier in their history they did, and they were pious Jews, but then something happened, and the vast majority of Jews, once they found out that the Sabbateans were violating Jewish law on purpose, as a religious devotion, they separated from them, and they stopped believing that Shabtai Tzvi was the Mashiach. But the same theoretically is true with other false messiahs, and so meaning for that reason, Lubavitchers who believe, not that all Lubavitchers believe this, but many do, those Lubavitchers that believe that their Rebbe's Mashiach, as long as they're still pious Jews and they're adherent to halacha, they are still part of the Klal Yisrael. Now, there are certain ones maybe that they'll make barbecues on Tisha B'Av, and you can discuss the whole issue about that, and that's obviously against halacha. But with that being said, still the vast majority do not do things like that. The vast majority, even of the Mashiachist Lubavitchers, fast on Tisha B'Av. And then so too, you want to discuss there are different types of groups that call themselves Messianic Jews, and so there are those who are just Christians who just are, and there's nothing really Jewish about them any more than there's anything Jewish about a Jewish atheist. But there are those who try their best to be adherent to halacha. Many of them, though, are ignorant of halacha or take different stands that are normative. Normativeness is not necessarily, though, the be-all and end-all. I know there's a lot of discussion in the Orthodox community. Obviously, they're not normative because they believe Jesus is the Messiah, or that he's a Tana, or some nonsense like that. And it's nonsense. It's not part of our tradition in any way. It's, I would say, very positive that the Christian world has their Jesus. That's a good thing for them because it helps them to become closer to Torah. Otherwise they would have been pagans. They would have been, something totally different. And not only that, but the influence that Christianity and Islam have had on the world has been a positive impact even on the pagan communities. Meaning we would talk about the story of the British colonialists in India, who they approached the Hindu priests who were burning widows on a funeral pyre, and they said, kind gentlemen, we respect your religious right to burn widows, but then you should also, and your culture's ideology of burning widows, but you must therefore, just as we respect you, you should respect us, that we execute men who burn innocent widows and hang them or whatever, put them in the firing squad or whatever we do to them because they're murderers. And because of that, for the most part, the practice of widow burning has come to an end in India. And that's directly because of Christianity. And Christianity is because of Judaism. And so the same thing when you meet Wiccans and all these other groups that exist, they have some level of at least value of human rights that come directly from Torah through Christianity. Christianity spread these Torah ideas to the world, meaning because if you go back in the ancient times, when they had not only they had human sacrifice, but they just had many pagan cultures had zero value for human beings. They didn't see individual human rights. They saw collectivism, much how the communists see today. And everything was about the collective and not that much about the individual. And so therefore, just like the communist Chinese will execute little girls, will murder little girls just for being born girls, so too the Spartans in ancient Greece would do the same thing. If there's a letter from a Spartan soldier to his wife. He said, I know you're with child, I know you're pregnant, and if it's a boy, I want him to be raised how I was and go to the same academy that I went to, military academy, and raised to be a great Spartan soldier. And if it's a girl, discard it. That is what pre-Judeo-Christian Europe believed, is that human life was of no value, and female lives were of no value. Judaism and Christianity gave human rights to women, gave human rights to indentured servants and even to slaves that did not exist in ancient Rome and so forth, ancient Greece, before Christianity spread. And so today you have these neo-pagans, but they're not doing human sacrifices. They're not, they do believe in human rights. They do believe basically in Judeo-Christian values without the Judeo-Christian theologies. Not to say that they don't engage in other things that are problematic, even under the 7 laws of Noah. They are in violation of the 7 laws of Noah, yes, but they're living in violation while while still they're better than they used to be. And so in our modern society, where we do have religious freedom, and I'm a big supporter of religious freedom, and the very radical Jeffersonian religious freedom, not just like how it is in Europe or in Israel and these other countries where you have to register every religion with the government. Now if you want tax exempt status, you're allowed to in America, register your religion with the government, but you're not forced to. You're under no obligation to do so. Whereas, I had applied to be a chief rabbi of Munich, Germany, and I had an interview on the phone, and I was just so appalled by the ideology of Europe, where in Germany, for example, and it's not true in every European country, but this is generally the European way, is that if you're a rabbi of a synagogue, you're basically the chief rabbi of the town, of the city or the town, and you're not hired by the congregation the way it is in America. You're hired by the state, and the state collects a tax from all the Jews to upkeep the synagogue and to pay the rabbi's salary and so forth. And similarly to the Muslims and to the Lutherans and the Catholics, and the government controls the religion. And it's the same way in Israel, and it's appalling to me. Anyway, Spiro Agnew, he said about Norman Vincent Peale, he said he found Paul appealing and Peale appalling. Anyway, back to what we were saying. With all this being said, that's kind of my catchphrase, is that with all this being said, a bald eagle. It's so beautiful. I saw a fox this morning, a bald eagle today. So, they're such big birds. The fox you think of as being much bigger than it is, and the bald eagle you don't realize quite how large it is. It's a very large bird. Anyway, I get distracted very easily. Manoa Elon Zeh, Manoa Nir Zeh. But I'm not talking Torah right now that much, am I? So I'm not mafsing the Mishnasai. So anyway, it was Niflus Abare. So what were we saying here? So the same thing, when we deal with even the Satanists have a code of ethics. I mean, I don't mean this to put down Ayn Rand, but it's basically Ayn Rand. It's basically that, society gains through selfishness. That if people are selfish and caring about themselves, they're not going to want to disrupt the peace, because they want to live in a peaceful society, and so therefore you're going to be part of that peaceful society. Do I have a key to the bank? Not the bank, the post office. I don't think so. Anyway, that's not it. So, what is that? Is that a Hanukkah candle or is that a piece of candy? I don't know. So, what were we saying here? With that being said, there is a movement in different places in the world where they have like the Society for Ethical Culture or Ethical Humanism or whatever, these types of organizations which are very much religious in nature. Or you have another, much worse than Messianic Judaism, and yet for some reason we don't disparage them as much as we do the Messianic Jews. Much worse than Messianic Judaism, humanistic Judaism, atheist communities that still have robbed our name of Judaism just because they claim some Jewish heritage. That's not Jewish. And they're much worse. The so-called humanistic Judaism is much worse than the so-called Messianic Judaism. Yet they're accepted by the mainstream secular Jewish communities as being, equal to the Reform, the Conservatives, and the Orthodox. And the Reform are also problematic because they deny the resurrection. They even change the liturgy to remove references to resurrection, which is a basic dogma. That's a problem. It's problematic. It's not Judaism. But with all this being said, just like, I work in a prison. I'm the head chaplain in a prison. My belief, as far as how to operate in the government function as a chaplain, is that we should consider the atheists or the ethical humanists as a religion just like any other religion, meaning there should be atheist chaplains to serve the atheist communities. I work also for New York State Office of Mental Health, and we have spirituality groups, and the spirituality groups say that how does Albany define spirituality? Whatever makes your life meaningful. And what I say, I understand that to mean, what that makes us different than animals. Which is back to what we were saying about what Rabbi Chanan Wasserman said, Hashem Yom Kamdamo, that without fear of God we're animals. So therefore fear of God is spirituality, and therefore spirituality is fear of God. Meaning therefore making your life meaningful is Yiras Shamayim. Understanding that your life has meaning and that you're not an animal. That is Yiras Shamayim, fear of heaven. Awareness that there's something more. That's what it means, Yiras Shamayim. That there's awareness that there's something more than just eating and drinking and reproducing and going to the bathroom. And that all of those things could have meaning. You know, if you approach it in the right way. But if you don't, so then what are you doing? You're just an animal. You're just a cow eating grass. So you're eating the cow. If you stop and think how'd that piece of cow get to your plate, so then you're putting meaning in your life. And you can do that without believing in anything supernatural. Meaning being simply mindful is spiritual. And so perhaps Avraham Avinu, he was saying the Philistines were not a mindful people. They were known as Leitzanim, they were known as mockers, scoffers, jokers. We see how they treated Samson, and they made sport out of ridiculing people. They didn't see they had an ideology of fun, but didn't bring true happiness to their lives, and that's where they lost out. So and the fact is, where do these secular atheists who believe in humanism get their ideas of humanism? It comes from us. It comes from Torah. Meaning there really is no such thing as secular humanism. All humanism is based on the fact that human beings are made in the image of God. But they claim to deny that. So that's their theology. What we have to worry about, especially as a prison chaplain, something like that, a military chaplain, is how do they act? How do they conduct themselves? Do they conduct themselves honorably? Are they conducting themselves in a manner that is restorative, restoring their humanity? That's why I've often said that, you know, people claim that prisons dehumanize inmates, and I said no, prisons are rehumanizing them. Society might have dehumanized them, and they might have dehumanized themselves by their crime. But we're in the job of rehumanizing people, of bringing people back through education, through chaplaincy work, through work, and learning, you know, through work, how to become, you know, a functioning member of society. You know, and I was reading about an inmate. He stole something worth less than $40 just for drugs. Just so he could sell it for drugs. He probably wasn't even going to sell it for $40. You know? And so he wound up, not only with 2 years in prison, but with $2,000 of court fees and so forth that he owes. So, you know, what's that all about? Well, that's, you know, it's because he was stupid. You know, he didn't look at the big picture. You know, he stole something worth $40, and now he has to, not only lost 2 years of his life when he could have maybe made $10,000-$20,000 a year in those 2 years, even doing menial labor, and maybe he could have made more. In those 2 years, he could have made $100,000 working. you know, and instead that time is wasted, and you know, he's working instead for $15 a month, you know, that maybe he'll pay his cable bill. And then you have the other side of that is what do you call it, you know, the court fees and everything, you know, what he wasted. And that's and these drugs and stuff dehumanized him, turned him into an animal, not thinking, not having meaning in his life. Coming to election day, maybe I'll make a different video about this, you know, voting as a spiritual practice, because animals don't vote. Learning history as a spiritual practice, because, you know, a Cocker Spaniel doesn't look at the first Cocker Spaniel who got his AKC certificate the way that we look at George Washington. He doesn't. They don't. You know, science and math and all of these things, animals don't do these things. And we do. Even just talking. You know, Larry Arney always says, you know, that you know, he raises on the floor Cocker Spaniel dogs and babies, and yet, and they're pretty much treated the same way. They're raised in the same manner, eating food off the floor. And yet around 2 years old, the babies start to talk, and the dogs, they never start to talk. You know, so you know, this is part of, you know, the type of things we got to think about in life. Those girls, they walked all the way to Dollar General. Well, they walked to shul on some Torah. All right. So, you know, if we engage in these ideas of, you know, life has meaning. You know, what is Fulton Sheen? It shows life is worth living. So, but all these things in life, and then things like music and art and all these things are spiritual. And the thing is that's why all these things exist in religion. Meaning, religion has music, religion has art, religion has history, religion has interest in science and math. You know, because all of these things are spiritual. And so, but certain people, you know, I remember at one of these spirituality groups, the one guy said, well, rock and roll is my religion. And I said, yes, for you, that's what it is. And maybe there's a certain feeling that you get from it, and certain meaning that you get. You think about these words and they inspire you. And it's good. And it makes your life meaningful. And so therefore, you know, if in a prison there's a volunteer who wants to come in and teach the atheist inmates ethics and morals, I have no problem with it any more than I have a problem with a Wiccan or an Odinist volunteer coming in and teaching them ethics and morals from their tradition. And I think, and as much as I personally disagree with all of these traditions, I can find some beauty and inspiration in this. And so, you know, and so they want to sit and read Bertrand Russell or whatever. As long as they're not disparaging other religions, we're going to treat you just like every other religion. But the thing is, the atheists don't want to be treated like religion because they want to be in control. And we can't let them do that. But, and the other part of it is, it doesn't work. You know, like Rabbi Weinberger always told the story of Bertrand Russell, how he, he's this great ethicist, but he wasn't very ethical. And when they confronted him about it, he said, "Well, was Einstein a triangle, or was Einstein some kind of mathematic equation?" And meaning if someone doesn't believe in God, what's to stop them from stealing if they're not going to get caught? But if you believe in God, you're not going to steal. So, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. We'll see you later. Take care.